Welcome back to Study Skills for Success in College. This is Chapter 5, Learning Styles, Memory, and Test Taking. The objectives for this particular chapter are to explain Gardner's multiple intelligences theory, to describe your preferred learning styles, to improve on a less well-developed learning style, to select effective study strategies based on your learning styles, to identify types of memory, to use effective memory techniques, to select strategies to improve your test-taking skills, to develop strategies to interact positively with faculty. Here's our chapter outline. In this particular lecture, we'll cover numbers 1 and 2, Introduction in Learning Styles. Students often start college without memory or test-taking skills and without knowing or understanding their own learning styles. And pretty soon they realize they need to improve their skills in these areas, particularly test-taking. Exams now are often more challenging. Instructors cover more material in less time, and they ask higher-level questions than many of us experienced in our lives before college. And in some classes, your entire grade may be based on only 2 or 3 exams. So developing the skills and knowledge explored in this chapter will help you not only at school, but in your career. Once you graduate, learning and testing in most cases doesn't end. There's testing in one way or another in most professions. You'll have to learn and sometimes memorize new information and techniques for your work. To do so, it's important to gain a new level of self-awareness, particularly when it comes to how you learn and remember new information best. To begin the chapter, we'll discuss learning styles, and once you better understand your preferred ways of learning, you can develop the memory and test-taking techniques that work best for you. After exploring learning styles and memory techniques, we'll conclude with effective test-taking strategies and ways to interact positively with faculty. Have you ever thought about how you learn? Each of us has preferred styles of learning. Understanding this preference can help make us even better learners. Let's start by exploring your preferences in exercise 5-1. You may have difficulty answering some of these questions. Just put the answer that you think would most closely apply to you. And don't spend a whole lot of time on each question. Don't ponder, is it this or that? Just whatever comes to mind first, go ahead and put that answer. Although it's likely that you have one dominant learning style, you probably had answers in all 3. That is, if you did the exercise. That's because most of us use a combination of learning styles, and rightly so. Just as there are many ways to learn, there are also many ways to teach, and students have to be able to adapt to all of them. You will use similar adaptation strategies in the workplace, probably already have, when you have supervisors or colleagues with different approaches to working and learning. So, what can you do with this knowledge of your learning style? You can use it to adapt to challenging classroom situations. In addition to using visual materials, perhaps you can record material. Now, caution, be selective about recording class lectures. This is so important. Many students record lectures and, oh, by the way, make sure your instructor is okay with it, by the way. Many students will record lectures because they know they'll have a recording to go back to later. They zone out during class. And then they think, well, I'm tired. I don't have to pay attention. I can just go back and listen to it later on when I get home. But unfortunately, as you know, later may and probably never will arrive. A better way might be to record your own study materials. For example, if you have to learn some new vocabulary terms, Record yourself saying each term and its definition and listen to them on your commute to school or while you're going to class or on the treadmill at the gym. There is, as you've probably already discovered, access to all of the vocabulary words and or the terms found within each chapter on the BVT site. Studying in groups and discussing your work is also a good idea. You might have difficulty with a lecture class that provides few visual cues, such as board work, slideshow presentations, or diagram. In other words, you'll struggle if you're a visual learner and all you're doing is listening. In addition, you might struggle a bit to organize your notes. Find creative ways to write and organize your notes, like color coding or using concept maps. We'll be demonstrating that later. It can be helpful to rewrite your notes within a day of the lecture so you get additional visual reinforcement. With a preference for movement and hands-on learning, that would be kinesthetics, one should incorporate movement into their studying. Moving a bit while you study and taking regular breaks can be helpful. You might want to alternate active study tasks, maybe writing a paper, doing math homework, completing a lab assignment, with your reading assignments. Now, not everyone is like this. As I've stated throughout many of the lectures, everyone is different. Remember, you might have one dominant learning style, possibly two, but you have the capacity to use all three. Most successful students do. Do exercise 5-2, improving a learning style, to improve one of your less well-developed learning styles. Here's something to ponder. Of what we read, we learn 10%. Of what we hear, we learn 20%. Of what we see, we learn 30%. And of what we both see and hear, we learn 50%. Of what is discussed with others, we learn 70%. Of what we experience, we learn 80%. Of what we teach to someone else, we learn, wait for it, 95%. Now, also, although some people may argue the percentages, the general concepts are still true today based on what research on learning has shown. I've seen many of these studies, different studies from different sources, and each of them is very similar. The more senses you can involve in the process, the more you will learn. So text illustrations, website animations, videos, all of these things, the more you include, the more enhanced your learning process. Lab experiences and interactive games and exercises will also increase learning. And that's one reason that I really encourage students to, for example, in this class, do all the exercises found in the BVT lab in the textbook. Group or study discussions are highly beneficial. Study groups can help you in achieving academic success, to be sure. An excellent method for learning material is to explain concepts to each other. One of my top memorable experiences when I was working on my first master's degree occurred in my own home, when I invited 7 or 8 of my classmates over to spend a few hours collaborating on the material for our upcoming final exam in statistics. Each of us took several terms, spent an hour or so reviewing them and preparing for a mini lecture to our peers. While a student was then lecturing, the rest of the students were writing down questions that we had and comments about the material being presented. Not only did each of us pass the exam with high marks, but we made some lasting friendships as well. Do you have a preference between following a map or following written directions to get to a new destination? Do you enjoy math and science classes more than English and literature, or vice versa? Are you praised as a good listener, or do you tend to shy away from groups? Your responses to these questions provide insight into the various intelligences you possess. That's right, intelligences, plural. Howard Gardner, a university professor, developed a theory called multiple intelligences. Basically, he argued that we all have different types of intelligences, and within each person, some intelligences are better developed than others. If you're a student who prefers math and science classes over English, you have a well developed logic math intelligence. If you communicate well with others, your interpersonal intelligence is better developed. Please do not take any of this to mean that if you struggle in an area, you can't improve because of your intelligence. We've heard countless students say things like, I don't have a mind for math, or I'll just never understand chemistry. Rather than give up, most students need to work on these areas and take steps to develop these skills, perhaps by using what they already are good at. Applying Gardner's theory means using as many intelligence as possible when learning or teaching new information. For example, when learning about interest rates for borrowing money, you could read about it. That would be linguistic. You could do mathematical problems. That would be logical, mathematical. You could construct graphs. That would be visual, spatial. You could make up a song. Of course, that would be musical. You could relate it to your personal finances. That would be intrapersonal. You could discuss it with a group, interpersonal. You could demonstrate with real money, kinesthetic. You don't have to use all 8 to learn a concept, but the more intelligences you use, the better you'll understand the material. Find out what intelligences are strongest for you in exercise 5-3. I hope these concepts and tips have been helpful. Let's take a look at what we've learned.